that is what manifestation is, taking energy and turning it into three-dimensional reality. And I love to appreciate and touch that. We are giving ourselves abundant love, safety, and belonging in every single moment.
From To Be Magnetic, this is the Expanded Podcast with your host, Lacey Phillips.
And your host, Jessica Gill.
As the leading destination for neural manifestation, we dispel the woo-woo in order to help you create real, tangible results based on neuroplasticity, psychology, epigenetics, and energetics. Our goal is to normalize the practice of manifestation and empower you to get into the driver's seat of your life in order to manifest the experiences, relationships, and things that most align with your authenticity. And by pressing play, the process begins.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Expanded. Jessica here. So I kind of want to kick off today, given everything that's happening globally this week. If you are tuning in way after the air date of this episode, then this just might be a good moment for your nervous system. But wherever you are in the world, if you're listening to this, I want you to take a moment and look at the surrounding areas around you. What's in front of you, to the sides, behind you. Really ground into the space that you're in. Recognize something beautiful in front of you, perhaps a flower, a flash of light. And you can even close your eyes as long as you're not driving. And take a deep inhale into your belly, letting it fill up, and a slow exhale out. I really wanted to kick off today with a moment of stillness because I think when really devastating things happen around the world or in our own lives, we can forget to take a breath, take a moment of pause, to settle ourselves so we are better equipped to show up in our lives. For anyone else that may be struggling right now and is having a hard time, we wanted to offer our Safe Deep Imagining, which is a hypnosis meditation. Our safe one in particular is crafted with EMDR-informed techniques. And it's really a resourcing tool. It helps you cultivate a safe space and place in your mind and a safe person you can refer to. So if you or anyone you know is having a hard time and could use a tool like this, all you have to do is download the TBM app. You don't need to sign in. You don't need to pay. Completely free. It'll be on the front homepage. And we hope that gives some comfort to you all right now. Before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to mention a couple updates in the TBM world. One, we have some manifestations percolating for our LA community. So many of you have asked us to open up the LA venue, and it looks like we may have a new location that we can up level to. So if you are interested in coming to our speaking tour in LA on December 2nd, there is a wait list linked in the show notes, or you can look at the speaking tour checkout sales page. There's a wait list there. Join the waitlist, and on Monday, you're gonna get an email where you can be the first person to purchase these new batch of tickets. So if you wanna make sure to secure it this time around, join the waitlist. You'll be first to hear about the ticket sales, and then any left over after the waitlist will go out to the greater community. So stay tuned for that and make sure to sign up for our LA waitlist. And for any current Pathway members whose membership is about to expire, you're about to hit your 1 year, stay tuned for a renewal email that will be coming through in the next couple weeks. If you're due for a renewal at the end of the month, check out next week and we'll keep rolling them out over the next season. But I know a lot of people signed up around this time last year, so keep your eyes peeled for your renewal email with a very special offer. Today's episode, we have a highly requested guest, Flynn Skidmore. Flynn is a therapist trained in acceptance and commitment therapy, as well as hypnosis and internal family systems and somatic experiencing. What I really love about Flynn and what we dive into in this episode is Flynn is so focused on cultivating a deep, true, rich inner experience with himself and his emotions that then in turn reflects outwardly. It's really the power of manifestation. When we can be at peace with all of the parts inside of us, when we can be at peace with our shadow parts, our inner child parts, our magnetic self parts, when we can have them all work in harmony inside, not judging or shaming those parts, but looking to them for compassion, we can then have our outside world reflect all the things that we're truly desiring, everything we talk about at TBM. We have a really expansive conversation that I think will open your mind to how you are navigating this manifestation work, and even how you're thinking about the autonomy you have over things happening in your life. You know, one of the things we're covering right now on our social channels is talking about our rut, our rock bottom, our next level. We have a quiz free for you guys if you want to check out which phase you're in, or the magic dark. And part of understanding the phase that you're in is honoring that phase you're in, giving compassion to the lessons that are being asked to be learned in that phase, or the pain or the grief that may be coming up during that phase, allowing those emotions to come through and run through. And when we can sort of surrender to them, listen to what they're calling for us, that's when we can start to have a more integrated internal experience, and our outward world starts to reflect it as well. I think you guys are really going to love this one. Enjoy.
And now, a word from our partners.
Did you know that every single time you brush your teeth, you swallow a little bit of your glob of toothpaste? And over the course of a week, you're actually swallowing almost an entire blob. There is so many additives and preservatives and things that are not necessary for keeping our teeth clean, but are simply in our toothpaste just to stabilize the water and make it a paste form. And so founder of Bite Toothpaste Bits a few years back invented an incredible toothpaste bite that removes the water and thus removes all the additives. So you have all of the stuff you need for pearly white, beautiful, healthy teeth, and none of the stuff you don't. It is one of the cleanest toothpastes on the market, and it even has nanohydroxypate, which is a natural form of fluoride. So it helps support your teeth, restore your enamel, and help with sensitivity. They are my absolute go-to, and I love that they are so sustainable and compostable. There's no plastic tube to get rid of. Everything is fully recyclable. You can get it on subscription, so you could have the little bites with you. They're so easy to travel with, so you don't need to leave it in your check bag. You can go through security with it. And we have a code where you can receive 20% off your order. Use the code MAGNETIC, all caps, MAGNETIC, for 20% off. Again, that's code MAGNETIC. And you can check out the show notes to find their website and all the incredible products they have to offer, and their beautiful pledge to sustainability and how they are working to help the environment.
All right, on to the episode.
So we have had actually a guest request for you for quite some time, Flynn, and a lot of our TBM team members have been like, have you seen Flynn's content? Have you seen his Instagrams and his TikToks? So you have been highly requested on here, and welcome everyone, Flynn Skidmore.
That feels really good to hear. Getting TBM love fills my heart. I really appreciate that. So everyone who made that request, thank you so much. And thank you so much for inviting me on.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so one question we kick off with is, do you know your astrology, your sun, moon, and rising sign?
Oh, not that well. So I kind of do this thing where it's almost like I purposely don't internalize the information because I love having a person read the chart to me so much. It's kind of like when you're in a doctor's office and the nurse really cares about checking in on you and like really cares about the checklist. It's like ASMR to me, and I get to surrender and my body feels tingly. So I try to optimize for that experience as often as possible, which means that I don't memorize my astrology chart. But I know I am a Taurus, and I was born May 13th, 1990, 4:30 p.m. in New York City, New York.
Someone's looking that up right now.
That's what I was hoping, that there was Googling happening.
Well, Taurus definitely makes sense because Taurus, from what I know, and I'm definitely not an expert, but I've asked this question so many times, you start to see patterns. Taurus is into the beauty of life, pulling out the beauty, pulling out the romanticism of all parts of life. And it doesn't have to mean like lavish life. It could just mean romanticizing the little beautiful things within your life. And I feel like from following you on Instagram, you definitely do that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think for a lot of my 20s were defined by like being hyper aware of every single thing possible about myself and hating just about everything that I was aware of. And astrology, even though I really don't know that much about it, is one of the things that has really helped me fall in love with the idea and appreciate about myself that I am materialistic, in the sense of I love materials. I actually love this three-dimensional world. I love quality. I love the idea of generations of the development of a skill or a craft, and then one person embodying all of that insight and wisdom and knowledge, pouring their soul into creating something in this three-dimensional world, and then I get to touch it, or it touches me. I love that so much. To me, that is what manifestation is like taking memory, taking vision, taking insight, taking energy, and turning it into three-dimensional reality. And I love to like appreciate and touch that.
Oh, yes. That's huge Taurus energy. I love it.
Big Taurus energy.
Okay. And what is your cultural background and upbringing? And how did that sort of inform who you are today? What were some of the lessons there?
Great question. So I am like white, Western Europe. I remember when I was in third grade, I learned that we were German and English and Irish, and I cried because I grew up, I thought it was so boring. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in a neighborhood that was really diverse, but like it had historically been a Black and Puerto Rican neighborhood. I went to public schools my whole life. So New York City public school system, which is like that in and of itself. I think New York City public school is like pretty solid education, but in terms of life and dynamics and diversity, like about as wonderful as an education someone could possibly get. So in my neighborhood and as a little kid in school, had this sort of strange experience that I perceived myself to be a minority until I was about 10 or 11 years old and gained the awareness that I was very much part of the majority. I was just having this unique experience being the minority in my particular setting. So while other kids' parents were listening to like Friday reggaeton nights on Hot 97, my parents were listening to like REM and Alanis Morissette on 95.5. I think it was called PLJ. And from a very young age, I was aware of how my cultural upbringing was different than what was around me, and wanted to invest energy into matching what I was seeing around me and hiding away what my family was. But there are so many beautiful things about that experience that I had growing up in Brooklyn. Like in my neighborhood in particular, very community oriented, a lot of love, but a lot of people who were important members in that community were also like stealing suits off of the Macy's truck and then walking around the neighborhood and selling those suits, or like stealing garbage bags from Home Depot and like selling that, or selling drugs and going to jail. So I had this experience of like these people who I know intimately and know really well, and who I trust and who I sit on the stoop and speak with, and who's like friends with my dad. They were also doing things that the rest of the world would see as bad. So it really exposed me to this idea that one person can be many things at once. And it got me to be really curious about not defining one person as one thing, but instead applying an immense amount of curiosity to all of the things that one person can be.
I mean, what a good lesson. I even think the idea of stealing something off a truck and selling it in society, like that's bad. And sure, you don't want to undo harm onto anyone, but there's so many other complexities at play there that it's not really clear to say that that's an all bad situation or an all good situation.
It's funny you say that because I used the word good in a piece of content that I made today because I'm actually coming back into a relationship with good and bad where for a few years I was only in the gray area of rejecting anything as good or bad. There's just what is and what I like and don't like, and what I like and don't like doesn't speak to any kind of objective reality. It only speaks to my preference. But I'm starting to use the word good honestly for efficiency's sake. There's a version of it where it's just like, okay, Flynn, just use that word. We understand what that means.
Well, I also like that you point out this concept of preferences. If we are assigning our own sensations, we're like, wow, these sensations feel really good in my body. Being in this space or being in this city or being around these people feel good. When I'm around these people, I feel small, constricted. My body doesn't feel as good. Maybe you have a stomach ache. I think the internal recognition of good and not good can be applicable.
I really agree with that. And one of the things that I strongly believe in is that the only thing that I can know is what I feel in this moment. I personally operate with the perspective that I can't know for sure that my past actually existed. If I had to bet money, I would bet that my past actually did happen. But I can't know for sure that I wasn't plopped here an hour ago, programmed to experience and perceive the world a particular way. All I can know for sure with certainty, without assumption, is what I feel in this moment and whether or not I like what I feel. And if I like what I feel in this moment, then I get to pay attention to the things I'm doing, the thoughts I'm thinking, the ways I'm choosing to relate, the way I'm speaking, the way I'm moving my body that seems to be contributing to this internal experience that I like. And if I like it, then I get to do more of those things to amplify that internal experience and get more of it. And if I don't like the internal experience that I'm having, then it's on me to take a look at the same things, the ways I'm relating, the thoughts I'm thinking, the way I'm relating to my own internal world, the way I'm moving my body, all of these things that seem to be contributing to this experience that I don't like. And if I don't like it, then it's really on me to figure out how to transform the not liking thing into something that I might prefer instead.
And you've talked about on your podcast and other places too, how there was a time in which you didn't operate from that mindset. Now you've been very intentional in, okay, how do we really attune to what's going on internally and create more of that sensation and that feeling and know when we're off kilter, like a compass. But one video you had posted actually about you had worked around a bunch of narcissists and there was a pattern of that happening. And I'm sure if you look at relationships during that time or other friendships, there's things that felt unaligned. How did you operate then? And then how did you shift it to operate how you are now?
Really great question. Yeah. So one thing that's important to keep in mind, I think that some of the people that I'm speaking about in that video can be diagnosed as narcissists. It is also really important to keep in mind that of all of the diagnoses in the DSM-5, what we are able to diagnose people with, what are considered psychological disorders, narcissism has the lowest rate of diagnosis. So that either means that people are on a mass scale diagnosing narcissism incorrectly, or the colloquial use of narcissism is inaccurate. And when we're speaking about people as if they're narcissists, they're not actually narcissists.
Do you see it as like a spectrum? Because I think we definitely, like as a culture right now, it is such a pop culture word to say that's if it's something we don't like or a behavior we don't like, we tend to label it as that very quickly. But then there's also in our community specifically, we've had people talk about like, I've gone through years of therapy and I'm 100% sure that my parent checks every single box of this clinical term, that they're on this spectrum. They've had that experience. So do you see it as like a a spectrum of behaviors. How do you interpret that too?
This to me goes back to the thing of the only thing that I can know is whatever I feel in my body right now. I think that in many ways, it's helpful to have labels about what other people are, because understanding that, okay, yes, this person is operating in this way, and this is what I experience, and I experience unique wounds related to a relationship where this thing is present. But to me, all of that is intellectual interpretation, and that's beautiful. To me, the only thing that's knowable is how I feel. It takes nuance and spiritual and emotional and psychological athleticism to be able to get to this place, and that athleticism has to be trained over time. But I will say that what I think is the place to be at is, here's the experience I'm having internally with this person. I don't like it. Here are the ways that I'm noticing myself creating this internal experience based on how I'm interpreting this thing, based on my associative memory, like wounds from the past and how I'm projecting that into this. Here are the ways that I'm choosing, attracting, and being attracted to this particular dynamic where I feel this way, and I have a pattern of this throughout my life. So I'm taking accountability and responsibility of all of the things that I'm doing that seem to be contributing to this internal experience that I don't like, this contraction, this tension. Now, the next step is for me to attempt to co-create with this other person. So I might go to them and I say like, hey, I am noticing this pattern of feeling really tense and small and contracted when we interact. Here are all the things that I'm doing that I think are contributing to that experience. And here are the things that you are doing that I think are contributing to that experience. Now, what you get to do with that person is say, what's your internal experience? Like, what have been your patterns of internal experience? Tell me about that. Like, throughout our relationship, what does our dynamic make you feel? And let's say that person says, there are a few ways this could go. Let's say that person says like, wow, well, I feel great. I had no idea that you were feeling that way, right? Like, I feel nourished, joyful, expansive, fulfilled, enriched by our relationship dynamic. I'm so sorry you feel that way. My intention is for you to be fulfilled and satisfied. I want you to be the exact version of you that you want to be. How can we work together to help create more of that experience for you? That's one version of it. Now, in that version, the person is taking ownership of their internal experience. They're bringing that as material to the relationship, seeking to co-create a new internal experience with that person, taking responsibility for the things they're doing to contribute to it, and then making it like a matter of interdependence and collaboration. And so then they start to work on creating that new internal experience for the one person. Let's say another version of it is like, yeah, you bring that to the person. They're like, yeah, I've been experiencing that too. Like, I feel really contracted. I actually sometimes feel like I want to throw up after our interaction. So you're like, okay, so we're both kind of feeling similarly. What do you want from this relationship? What is your ideal version of what this relationship is like and what it feels like in your body? And the person is like, well, I want it to be expansive. I want to be fulfilled, enriched. I want to experience love, joy, and I want that for you too. Then amazing. Then you both get to figure out how to both evolve your dynamic and evolve as individuals to both get more of that experience. Let's say the person says, I feel great and I don't care at all about what your experience is. That's your fault. You're doing those things to yourself. I'm doing this. Like, you should just accept me. Like, whatever it is that they're doing. I don't like personally to say, oh, that's a narcissist. What I like to say is that person has a low capacity for co-creation. If this person is okay with me feeling bad, I know that they are numbing themselves to a particular experience they're having. They're disembodied. I would die on this. I don't know this for sure, but I'm going to say this boldly. it is impossible for a feeling sentient being to be in the presence of another feeling sentient being who's hurting without feeling the hurt themselves. And the only way to continue contributing to someone else's hurt is if you are numb to your own hurt internally because you haven't ever developed the tools to do something with it. So in that case, I would say, okay, this person is okay with me being hurt by this relationship. They're not expressing any desire to amplify nourishment for us both. I'm not needing to label them as a narcissist. What I'm seeing is that they have a low capacity for co-creation. I take responsibility for who and what I invest my energy into. And I invest my energy into people who have a high capacity for co-creation, or at least have a high willingness to learn to be good at co-creation. And I don't invest my energy into people who don't have a high capacity for co-creation. That, to me, is the best way of navigating those dynamics.
I mean, that's a really, really powerful reframe. And it even makes me think of different parenting models, which instead of telling the kid, like, okay, if this happens, you have to do this, it's saying, here, you have choices. Clean up your side of the street and share what's coming up for you in a dynamic. And this can be any relationship. So I want anyone at home listening to really think about the different relationships, romantic, family, friends, coworkers, etc. Where are those situations not feeling good into your internal state of good? Can you have discourse and dialogue and own what's coming up for you to this person, and then allow them the space to sit with it and match it? And I would almost even be curious to see how many people in the moment may not react. The reaction is defensive because they're like so not used to anyone speaking to them like that. But that maybe after they have time to cool off or process or think about it, maybe come around and are actually interested in having a symbiotic co-creative space too.
Beautifully said. I love that. And that goes to the emotional, psychological, and spiritual athleticism that we're talking about. When you talk about someone getting that feedback and then they react to it, they might be angry, but then they come back. What we're hearing there is an okay athlete. The person who reacts to it and gets angry and never comes back, that's a terrible athlete. The person who gets hit with it, gets the little bit of anger, a little bit of defensiveness, gets knocked off their center, but like a great athlete, maintains their sense of center, their sense of balance, even when they're in a disadvantageous position, and comes back to center really fast. That's a high level athlete. What I really like is the idea of having a standard for each other in our culture and our society, in the way that we are interdependent, of high level emotional, psychological, and spiritual athletes. I think that a world where that's the norm for people to get that feedback, I don't feel good around you, but I want to create feeling good with you, where that's just like basic communication. Because what a relationship is, like what a conversation like that is, it's like two people are writing something together. They're writing let's say a book together. And when you bring information to the table like that, all you're doing is bringing a draft. And the intention of a draft is just to have something done so that you can make something a little better. And then you both go and you work on the draft again, and then you come together and you're in this revision process of making it a little better. And what a relationship is to me is this perpetual, infinite iteration of the draft. You'll never publish the book, but the goal is not to publish the book. The goal is to fall in love with the process of drafting with each other, bringing information to the table, working together to create the experience that two people want. That level of co-creation and ability to relate, that to me is the thing.
That also is what transforms the world. You know, that's what allows for healing. That's what allows for growth, for innovation, for healing the planet. Like anything you want to think of, that is going to get you into that space.
Yeah, I really agree with you.
Not all probiotics are created equal. There are a million different products on the market promising to fix, rebalance, restore, reset your gut microbiome and gut barrier. But how many of them actually do? So many are not grounded in science, and that is why we are such fans of Seed's Daily Symbiotic. They are a 2-in-1 pre and probiotic capsule that actually reaches the gut. They are the most science-backed probiotic on the market. Their team of experts, some of which who even coined the original term probiotic, are rigorous about their research, testing, and the quality assurance of their product. Probiotics are fragile and sensitive to heat, oxygen, light, moisture, which makes it really hard for them to fully get to the part of the digestive tract that they support the most. That's why Seed created the VitaCap. It's their proprietary capsule and capsule delivery system, which helps get 100% of the probiotic strains to the part of the digestive system that impacts it the most, which is why Seed is such an effective probiotic. And that is why I make sure to take my Seed 2 capsules first thing in the morning with a cup of lemon water to start off my day. It has made such a difference in my digestive health, my gut barrier integrity, my gut immune function, and it's even had an incredible impact on my skin. So if you're looking for a probiotic that actually works, you can use the code TBM for 30% off your first month supply of Seed's Daily Symbiotic. Again, that is code TBM for 30% off your first month supply. You can check out the link in the show notes or go to seed.com/TBM. Getting back to that shift you had, did you have a moment where you were like, okay, I'm in these dynamics with these people. I'm noticing that I'm an active participant in them by being around them. How were you able to, like one of the things you said in that video too, we'll link it in the show notes so you guys can check it out. I thought it was really insightful. One of the things you said was you couldn't achieve something without that person there, and that you had to realize you had blinders on to that one person, thinking you could only get access to whatever it was from that person. But when you actually turn your awareness outside and saw more, you're like, oh, wait, I can get that on my own. I don't need that from that person. How do you start to make those shifts for the people who are feeling stuck in those dynamics now?
So there have been a few, like I've attracted a few of these in my life, and I am so blessed to have a core group of people around me. I mean, the one that's been around me the longest has been my sister. She's like my light compass. She lives her life in an immense amount of joy. And when I am veering into darkness, she helps me. She makes that very clear for me when I'm veering into darkness. So I'm so blessed to have that type of relationship to help me identify when I'm getting sucked into a dynamic like this. But it's been a few throughout my life. The worst ones was when I was 17, and then one when I was 23. When I was 17, it was with a baseball coach. When I was 23, it was with a person who wanted to invest money for me to open a business. In both of those relationships, both people saw me as having some special thing that they wanted to be around and would communicate to me that being around me saved their soul in some way. And they're both way older men. The baseball coach was 70. The guy who invested in the business was, I think at the time, 45, and I was 24. And both of them set themselves up through agreements. There's nothing legal with the baseball thing, but with the business thing, it was financial and legal agreements for me to kind of have to spend a lot of time around them. And it was absolutely deteriorating my soul. Any person who's been involved in a narcissistic dynamic knows the icky feeling. The icky feeling was so bad that I was going gray in my early 20s. And truly, I was 30 in the business dynamic one. I didn't see a way out. In both instances, these were older men in positions of power who were telling me that they were going to help me get something. The baseball coach was college baseball stuff. The business guy was stuff with ascending into business and money and all that. And in these dynamics, I wanted these things so badly. I wanted the baseball thing. I wanted business success. And I was scared that I couldn't do it without him. And I was aware of this at the time. I knew that I was using him as much as he was using me. I was performing for him. I was like being the version of me that he needed me to be in both of those instances. And it's just like absolutely horrible. Both of those ended in an explosive way. I had to explode to get myself out of them. So yelling, anger, all that kind of stuff, explosion to get out. And what my process has been about since then is for most of my 20s, I was like sprinting through quicksand, trying to create this particular life for myself where I get to make a certain amount of money and live like a professional athlete and a professional artist. My soul needed it. Not having that felt like death. So I was just like scrambling, trying to do anything to figure out how to get to that place. And to be honest with you, the scramble energy, like when I look back, it ended up working. It put me in positions to be able to make better decisions going forward. So I created some external success for myself. And as I was creating the external success, I was starting to trust myself more that I was the thing that was going to be able to create the thing that I wanted. And then I started working with a coach. This was almost like 3 years ago, and I had a lot of knowledge about psychology and spirituality when I started working with him. But this coach, his name is Julian. I'm no longer working with him, but he was like the catalyst that helped me really embody the principles and the understanding. So what I started to learn was that it's not money that I wanted. It wasn't like living a certain place. What I wanted was joy. What I wanted was an internal experience. And actually, that internal experience is available in every single moment. And it is determined by the way I choose to relate to what's happening in my internal world and choose to relate to what's happening in my external world, the way I exchange energy. So as I started to understand, everything that I want is about an internal experience. And that internal experience is abundantly and infinitely available right now. And I started to be like, okay, well, I'm going to start to focus on that. And as I focused my awareness and attention onto the energetic version of the world, success started to like exponentially happen for me. Then I put myself in a position where I surrounded myself by people who I feel really good around, who I know are invested in my well-being. And I set myself up to be self-sufficient. So I don't need to invest in a relationship that makes me feel icky and hope that that's going to like get me something that I don't have. I know I have what I want in every single moment, and because I experience it, I feel it. And I know I'm going to be able to amplify that experience for the rest of my life based on the way that I choose to relate to myself, the world, and the things that I choose to build. So it's gone from this place of like massive scarcity, trying anything possible to achieve the success and the significance that I wanted, to now this place of like, in every single moment of my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I want to be. I love this right here. And I'm so excited to continue to build and to continue to get to exchange beautiful, enriching energy with people. So maybe there aren't like tangible things in there, but that's the transformation journey.
Well, I think there's definitely tangible tips too, and even understanding how you utilize your own energy to get out of situations like the explosion. I think it's like, okay, you did feel so trapped. I think so many people can relate to that when they're like, I just don't know how to get out of my own way. So I'm going to like, it's not self-sabotage. It's really self-protection. Do something so I can just rid myself of this situation once and for all. I think of early 20s relationships. I mean, that would happen all the time. You're like, I don't really know how to get out of this in the most graceful way. So I'm just going to make a huge mess and then I'll be able to exit. But I think the interesting thing is too, especially for our listeners, if you recognize yourself in any of the dynamics, earlier dynamics that Flynn was talking about, you guys have the awareness. You already have things building and circulating, and now you can exit those situations with intention, maybe without the blow up, with ease. You can manifest that exiting with ease in a different way. And I really love how you were saying it's really all about the sensation of how you wanted to feel, what you thought those external things would bring you, because that's something that comes up in manifestation all the time, is that people want these things and they're like, no, this is my thing. I want this. And what they're doing is basically pedestalizing having a material thing with the sensation of ease, joy, love, belonging, whatever it is. How can we break down the actual feeling you think you're going to have from this external thing and seek that? And then that external thing will likely come in with ease. And then you won't even care about that external thing anymore. It's like a nice to have, but you already have the thing you really wanted, which was that sensation.
Yeah. That thing I find a lot of people struggle with is a lot of people get that intellectually. They get the thing that they want is the feeling, and that what it's about is generating and amplifying the feeling, and then the external solution, the material thing, relationship, whatever it is, comes easier. But I find that people struggle with understanding how to actually feel differently. I'm curious about your experience with that. Did you learn how to feel differently?
Yeah. I think when it comes to that feeling, that sensation, I started to recognize that earlier on in my spiritual manifestation journey, where a lot of the initial manifestation rhetoric was like, feel the sensation of it now. That I'm now looking back was for sure more spiritual bypass. It was more like, oh, I was pretending to feel the feelings without actually feeling them. I only started to be able to connect the sensation in the moment without the tangible thing when I had experiences of having the tangible thing on another level. So if I wanted this thing, I would go out and manifest it. And then I'd be like, oh, that didn't feel like how I thought it would feel. Oh, okay, these were the sensations. How can I just almost act as if or feel into that right now and actually operate and make different decisions and broaden my awareness and have openness and curiosity in the space that I'm in. But it wasn't until I was able to have actual physical things come through that I could debunk the theory. And then I could tap into it more.
That makes sense to me. That's pretty consistent with a lot of things that I've heard people struggle with. Because then the other thing is okay, well, if I'm feeling the thing, then aren't I just bypassing what I'm actually feeling and then forcing myself or pretending to feel something that I don't actually feel? Which I really understand that. And I've done a lot of that through my life. When I speak about generating the experience that we want internally, what it is about for me is the skill of relationship. So how I relate to my internal world. Most of us are walking around the world with what we can call parts of ourselves. These are parts who have been conditioned to believe through their experience that love, safety, and belonging are scarce resources. And because love, safety, and belonging are scarce, because joy is not safe, these parts of us develop certain personalities, and inherent to the personality might actually be a perspective that shame is the safest internal experience to have, or sadness, or despair, or fear, or anger. What most people, when people talk about the higher self and all that, when people are experiencing a version of life that they don't like maybe they have a pattern of jobs that are just as toxic as their relationship patterns, we can make a pretty good guess that when they are creating those dynamics and relationships and environments, they're doing so through the lens of one of their parts who believes that something like shame or despair is the safest internal experience to have. So then that part, unconsciously, of course, the person wouldn't consciously choose to do this, though some people do. That part, believing that the energy of shame is the correct energy, builds an environment where shame is the experience that's had. And then the energy that a system is built with is the energy that is required to maintain it. So it's like this whole world has been created through a part of them And it's all happened unconsciously. And that part believes that shame or fear, despair, or sadness is the appropriate thing because they have learned love, safety, and belonging are scarce and that they're not safe to hope for love, safety, and belonging. Now, what I think is absolutely the move, when I help people understand this and feel it, they have this experience where they're like, oh my God, like all of the books, all of the things that I've ever read now actually make sense, because it's not about forcing those parts of us to change. What it's about is being wise, loving grandma who doesn't need them to change and is just having a loving, fun conversation with that part of us at the barbecue. So that part is invited to the family barbecue. It fully belongs. We want that part of us to benefit from the collective system of ourselves internally, and we want it to perceive that it contributes to the collective system. It's really important for people to understand that neglect is more damaging to a human nervous system than is physical abuse. When we have these parts of ourselves, what most of us are doing are repressing them and keeping them on an island. These parts who believe that shame or fear is the right thing, we don't know how to relate to those parts lovingly. So those parts perceive that they are all alone and that they don't belong to anything. I just see it over and over and over. When a person chooses to embody wise, loving, 13 billion year old like history of the universe, grandma energy, and move toward that part without needing to fix it or change it, but just be with it, that part is given life and vitality. It all of a sudden starts to perceive that love, safety, and belonging is available in a more abundantly. And when it starts to perceive that love, safety, and belonging is available more abundantly, then all of a sudden that part gets to become aware of what it has been doing historically, that it has like really believed shame was correct. And it starts to that part starts to become open to imagination and creativity. It's just like such a beautiful thing to see. And when people talk about changing internally and then the external changes, that's what they're talking about. How lovingly, how warmly, how much curiosity are you applying to these parts of you who have lived 30, 40 years of your life experiencing isolation, believing that shame is the right thing, who've built relationship dynamics in a life where shame is inherent to it. All of a sudden, for the first time, this part now perceives that it belongs. Then what happens? Who are you when all of your parts belong? That thing to me is the opposite of bypassing. It's unconditional inclusion and welcoming in. And when we learn to do that with ourselves internally, that's when we get to have the internal feeling, the experience of the external thing that we want. And then when we're practicing that in every moment of our lives, then yes, it does seem to be the case that the actualization of the external thing becomes much easier. And just like you said, we're not attached to it because we already have the thing that we want as a result of having it based on how we choose to relate to our inner world.
I think you named something so important, that when we are having those experiences that we feel like we need this external thing to validate us. If we can just have that career, if we could just have that home, or we can just have that thing, then life will be better. Exactly what you're saying. A part of us has taken over and is in the driver's seat and is assuming that that is the only thing that we can do to get there. And it's about getting curious to that part and be like, why do you think that's the only way to get there? Let's examine it, because that's not your true self underneath all of it.
That's so correct. It's a scarcity perspective like that. It's the same thing with me and those what we could describe as narcissistic relationships. I wanted something. I didn't know that what I wanted was a feeling. I thought I wanted to play D1 baseball. I thought I wanted to be a 24-year-old who's running a 6-figure business. Like, I thought those were the things that I wanted. What I actually wanted was those feelings. I was operating through the lens of a part of me who saw that investing in this icky relationship was my only or best option for getting those feelings, when actually what I was doing, if I wanted joy, what I was doing was generating ickiness, hoping that at some point ickiness would transform into joy. I wasn't practicing being the person that I actually wanted to be. I was practicing the thing that I didn't want, which is just like really icky, contracted, death-oriented internal experience.
I want everyone to just like take a second and think about your relationships at the end of this episode and really dive into the sensations you're feeling. Take that inventory of everything, because I think that's such a valuable understanding. It's almost like a false sense of hope. I hope if I keep this toxic dynamic up or this unhealthy pattern up or keep going on this way, that maybe it'll change and then I'll get everything I want on the other side. I just have to grunt and bear it. I have to fight through the pain of it. And that's not how we create and generate the sensations and the feelings that we want.
And I think it's so important to have an immensely compassionate and curious lens, which you are. I can feel that in you. But just to emphasize, when we are hoping that the toxic thing somehow transforms into the fulfilling thing, we're operating through the lens of a part of us who sincerely believes that this is the best strategy to access love, safety, and belonging. Sincerely, that part wants love. It just doesn't yet have it's not aware of the strategies that are actually going to produce love. It wants love, but the result it's actually producing is like shame or fear, toxicity, ickiness, whatever the internal experience is. One of the things that I think is so important is being a person who just like in your bones, in every cell of your body, you know that what you're seeing is the best thing that person, that thing in you could currently be doing. It is the absolute most adaptable, perfectly energetically efficient expression. And when those parts of us or other people have different information, they just naturally behave differently. These are phenomenon, these are principles that like are not even human. We're having a human experience of them. They've existed, as far as we know, for like 13 billion years. They're just like a handful of principles of how the universe operates. Systems move toward balance and efficiency and coherence and harmony. Like, think about solar systems organizing themselves. No one had to think about, as far as we know, a solar system figuring out this beautiful balance, but it figured it out. So much of this is just learning to bring light, bring love, bring compassion to these parts of us who are doing the best that they can. The compassion, the love, the warmth, the curiosity is the thing that melts all of the tension so that we can get out of our own way and just let these phenomena that the universe is so good at, harmony, coherence, just happen and take over. And then our lives become a practice of harmony and coherence. And we get to notice all of the things that we're doing internally that veer us away from harmony and coherence, and just make minor, little, loving, curious, experimental tweaks so that we can allow the coherence and the harmony to again take over.
There's so many people out there settling for unfulfilling relationships, or people who are stuck in toxic jobs, living in places and spaces that don't inspire them, and especially people who feel like they'll never be able to afford the things and the life that they truly desire. How do I know that? Because it was me before I discovered that manifestation is actually a totally viable, scientifically proven method of creating the life you want. I'm Lacey, I'm the founder of To Be Magnetic, and if you're not familiar with us, we at TBM offer workshops that teach you how to manifest literally everything, from love to money to career to beyond. Our courses are the most effective manifestation method on the market, and that's because of a secret that I discovered years ago about manifestation, which is you do not manifest from your thoughts. You manifest from your subconscious beliefs. So after decades of client research and input from leading doctors and therapists, we designed courses that help you rewire your subconscious mind to align with what you want to manifest. And the best part of all, for any skeptic out there, our work is completely scientifically proven to work. Just ask the tens of thousands of members inside our Pathway membership, which gives you unlimited access to all of our workshops, tools, and offerings that you'll use over the course of a year. This includes workshops on inner child, shadow, boundaries, love, money, the infamous ruts, and the horrible rock bottoms, and so much more. Use our special code EXPANDED, all caps EXPANDED, to receive $20 off your first TBM purchase. Again, that's all caps EXPANDED, EXPANDED. Okay, now back to the episode.
Pivoting a little bit here too, because we had so many questions about this, ADHD and the societal programming. My fiance has ADHD and his therapist is telling him that people who have ADHD or ADD, by the time that they're in elementary school, has had like 11,000 bits of negative information spoke to them about their mind, their behavior, how they operate, their intelligence, more so than any other kid. And so it's really interesting to think about, how do you break down the belief system that may be something that's impeding your success or impeding creativity or impeding getting things done, and seeing it as a superpower in its own right and utilizing that, especially with entrepreneurship.
Okay. I know that this is a little bit antithetical to be magnetic, but I think that people tend to overemphasize the belief thing. I think that things can be much simpler than the belief thing, because what a lot of people find themselves in is the position where they're like, oh my God, this has been encoded and programmed in me. Like, I believe this, I have to change my belief, but I don't yet believe this other thing about myself. So how can I be the thing if I don't believe it? And I find that it creates a lot of confusion and chaos when things are actually a lot simpler. Like something with ADHD, and let's say your fiance, for instance, I'd be curious about what he wants to change about himself. That's the first thing, because I don't even want to operate with the assumption that ADHD is impacting in his life in a way that he doesn't like. So what I would want to do first is identify the very specific thing that he wants to change about his life. And let's say that thing is, when he sits down to work, he somehow spends 3 hours and doesn't do any of the tasks that he wants to do, which I do that all the time. So this is what I would do. I would say, when you're doing that, what's the internal experience you're having? When you think about you doing that, what's the internal experience you're having? What is that like for you to do that? And he's like, it's chaotic, it's stressful, I experience shame. Okay, so we're not even going to focus on the external practices of like being at the computer. What we're going to focus on is the internal experience. So you're engaging in a practice of shame and chaos. Tell me about what you want. Now, if he were to say, well, I want shame and chaos, then it'd be perfect. We're going to continue to have you do exactly what you're doing. But of course, no one would say that. He would probably want calm, groundedness. Let's say he were to say, I want to be more productive. I'd be like, all right, well, what is productivity and what does that do for you to be more productive? Well, then I get to accomplish more. I get to make more money. I get to build more things. Okay, so when you're in that world where you're accomplishing more, making more money, building more things, what's that like? What's the internal experience like? It's peaceful, it's grounding, it's calm. Okay, so what we're learning is that what you want is peace, groundedness, and calm. Now, if you were to experiment with the idea that peacefulness, groundedness, and calmness are infinitely available in every moment, I'm not saying that that's true. I'm giving you something to go off and experiment with, and you see for yourself if it's true or not. If you were to spend the rest of your life experimenting with that, who would you be and what would you do? Well, then if peace, calmness, were abundantly available to me, then I would do this thing a little bit differently with how I show up for productivity. I would commit to building this thing. And I'd be like, okay, tell me about what that thing is. What's the thing you want to build? it's this. Here's my biggest vision of it. Okay, now let's start to make a plan to actually build that thing. What are the things that are going to make it likely that you actually get to build that thing, while keeping in mind that the process of building that thing is not about building that thing. It's about helping you become a person who has more access to groundedness, joy, peace, and calm, those things that you want. And then we design a process that helps him transform. In order to engage in that process, he doesn't need to have any belief. It is the process and the experience and the familiarization with this new thing that is going to be the thing that transforms his subconscious to understand that more groundedness, more peace, more joy, more calm is safe and available to him. And then all of a sudden, his neural wiring is different and he's a different person. He doesn't necessarily need to convince himself to believe something before that process. All he has to do is design the process for himself that seems most likely to produce the internal experiences that he wants, engage in that process, and then it is the experience of that process, the familiarization with what was formerly unfamiliar, that turns him into a new person. In terms of the parts of him who might have internalized the ideas that he's bad or he's whatever, that's all relationship with those parts. That's all. If what I want is groundedness and calm, then what is the grounded and calm way of relating to those parts of me? What is my current relationship with those parts of me? Am I exiling them? Am I isolating them? What does it look like to bring those parts of me into the light? Because those parts who have been told that they're bad or they're annoying or they're unproductive, all those bits of information, the thing that's happening is that those parts are perceiving abandonment. That's the scary thing. What we want is for him to be whoever, that part to be whoever he was as a little kid, and help that little kid have an experience of inclusion. But it's not so much about focusing on beliefs. What it's about is designing processes and that are likely to create the transformation of the subconscious to become familiar with new things. And it's about how we choose to relate to ourselves at every step along the way as we engage in that process.
First of all, thank you for sharing sort of a new lens and concept on it, because I know that's like a really brave sort of thing to kind of step out and throw out into the world. So I think that's really good insight and really good wisdom. And I appreciate you sharing openly on that. And I definitely agree. The only other thing I would maybe add, or like maybe think of beliefs through a different lens, at least how I think about them with the To Be Magnetic work. It's not like, what is this permanent belief that's plastered on my forehead and I have to remove it in order to manifest what I want? It's getting curious about the beliefs that that part is operating from.
Yes.
And it's a curiosity exercise in order to reparent that part. What is the belief that is taking over the driver's seat? The part of me that's in the driver's seat right now that's procrastinating, that's not doing the work they want, what do they believe? Well, they believe that I can't focus, I'm never going to get it done, and I need to shame myself into just like grit and bear it. Okay, cool. Now that we know that's the belief that they're operating from, how can we find compassion for that part, reparent that part, and then implant a new empowering belief that that part can start to get curious about? Can you get work done that isn't hard work and looks the same as everyone else? Can you get it done in a different way, in a way with ease, all the things that you were pulling to it as well? So that's maybe a different way to think about the beliefs working amongst everything else too.
That makes a lot of sense. You're looking at the way that those parts have made meaning of themselves and the world. And
Yes.
You're using the word belief as like what they have come to believe about themselves and the world and how they fit into the world. And you are relating to the part lovingly. I mean, there are a bunch of ways of describing this, but what the neuroscience says, which I think is super interesting, is when we relate to those parts lovingly and communicate abundant belonging, one, those parts start to relax a little bit, but when there's relaxation, our neural synapses open up so that they can receive new information and upgrade their old meaning-making systems. And then what you're saying is like, then what you do is you offer them a belief or a way of making meaning that better aligns with the outcomes that you want to produce.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like letting them see that there's a different option. I even think about, like, you're very familiar with internal family systems, but Dick Schwartz talks about, is there a new role that part wants to do? You know, it's like that version of that. It's like, what is the new belief? What's the new role that you maybe want to play that you haven't had space to operate from?
I'm really glad you said that because first off, I appreciate you appreciating me sharing that thing on beliefs and in you explaining your perspective on it. One thing that I did notice that I disagree with a bit is the implanting a belief. I personally like the idea of allowing the part to come up with the new meaning it wants to make of the world. So
Mm-hmm.
rather than giving the part the belief that we want it to have, I like being like, this is your playground. If you no longer believe that shame is what you have to experience, what would you prefer to feel? What would you prefer to see yourself as? And allowing the part to take ownership of that process. So the part, maybe for the first time ever, gets agency and autonomy and gets to choose. I think the problem that I have with beliefs is like, thinking that we have to somehow come up with a new belief. And when we do that, that's going to be the thing that solves the problem. But I really like the way that you're explaining it here. Like, I really love the collaborative way that you're approaching this.
Yeah, yeah. And for anyone listening who's in the membership and the part in the DI, we have this one section where we're like, okay, what is the new belief that they want to have? Apply Flynn's concept there too, where he's saying, ask that part to come up with that belief instead of, you know, your mind creating the opposite belief. Allow that part to create that belief in that moment during that deep imagining, because that can be even more effective and helpful. Look at us coming up with new stuff on
I love
on
that. That's incredible. I really love that. And I also just like more macro, like I think it's so cool the way that you are navigating disagreement. That is amazing. And I really appreciate that about you. But yeah, just like you said, it's like the solar system forming itself. What I personally enjoy is finding these phenomena of coherence that the universe seems to just know and creating the space to allow the phenomena to express itself. Like a little kid who has been shamed, gotten all this information about how bad they are, and then all of a sudden they're in an environment where they're abundantly and unconditionally loved. What's the phenomena that wants to express itself? Just like you're saying, like, what's this little kid's version of the solar system forming? How can you engage with that part of you in a way that like empowers that little kid or that little part to come up with it on their own? I really love the way that that was such good instruction to identify the way that you can immediately apply that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's also something I've learned in my own process, and then applying that to the tools at TBM is that we're always getting more information to make things better and better and better and better. And one thing that we tell our members all the time, yes, you have a framework for meditations and for deep imaginings and how to do this, but if that doesn't work with you, if that doesn't drive with you, if you need something different, give that to yourself. Like, your own internal feelings and sensations are the best teacher for you, not us, not anyone else. These are tools, and you can use the tools however they are best suited for you. So I think it's always in service of everyone knowing that they are the autonomous being who has all the healing tools already within them. It's just using different modalities to try to pull it out of you in a different way.
100% agree with that. I really like that approach.
Okay, let me see if I grabbed everything here. Oh, I love this sentiment that, are you the person who thinks they are allowed to have what they want? Talk about this feeling of like, okay, are you even allowing yourself? Like, do you think the version of you now is allowed to have the life they want, or is it conditional?
My whole body is lighting up that you caught that and noticed it enough to want to ask about that, because that is one of my favorite things. And not favorite things, not in the sense of like being like weird and liking that people struggle with that, but It's such a beautiful concept for people to become aware of in themselves and then transform and grow into something else. But yes, I find that a lot of people don't know what they want because they are either judging what it means to want something. So they look at someone externally and they have rules for what's okay for someone to want and what's not okay for someone to want. And they don't yet know how to externally apply curiosity to find out about what someone actually wants. Let's say, for instance, like an example I'll sometimes use is Jeff Bezos. Let's say Jeff Bezos comes to you and says, I want to be the wealthiest person who's ever existed. And I want for my accumulation of wealth to disempower other people. I want to take wealth from other people and build my own wealth. Most people say, oh my God, that's so bad. Like he should be ashamed of himself. We need to judge that. And that's a mistake because everything is an opportunity to apply curiosity. And also, just a little side note, the more that we would do that to someone like Jeff Bezos, the more likely a person like that is to want to hoard resources. So the question is like, how extreme of an environment can you apply curiosity? So imagine you're with Jeff Bezos and you get to ask him, and I actually don't think that that's what he wants, but I'm just using that as an example. And you were to ask him about that and be like, well, tell me about that. What does that do for you? What is that life like? Who's that version of you? Ultimately, what I would bet my life on, I can't know with certainty, but I would bet my life on it, that we would ultimately end up at the internal experience that Jeff Bezos wants to have. And that what he wants is things like calm, peace, groundedness, joy, love, confidence, stuff like that. Just like all of us, just like every human on the planet, he is desiring an internal experience that's associated with love, safety, and belonging. He may be using a strategy that's just not going to work to actually produce those internal experiences associated with love, safety, and belonging. He might be operating through the lens of parts that believe love, safety, and belonging is scarce and unavailable in this moment, and therefore have built one of the largest businesses any human has ever built in order to chase love, safety, and belonging. The point is, if we are operating with rules about what's okay to want and what's not, and when we say, oh, that's bad to want that, and I'm not going to apply curiosity to that, that lets me know that that person is doing that to themselves internally. They are judging what it means to want something. They are not seeing that the things that they actually want are love, joy, warmth, kindness, sincerity, curiosity. They're seeing like some things are okay to want and others aren't okay to want. And when a person learns to see that what it's all about is identifying those internal experiences, the feelings that you want, and then life is just about an amplification of those internal experiences and an exchange of those internal experiences. What happens is this really beautiful thing, whereas if what you want is love and you're holding yourself accountable to actually experiencing love, which is something that you can only know based on your awareness of what's happening internally, it's very difficult to harm other people. Evolution did not work in a way that a person can be amplifying love 10 out of 10 and be harming other people. But I'm talking about here if you're actually aware of what you're experiencing internally. So people judge what it means to want something. They think that wanting some things is okay and wanting other things is not okay because they haven't yet learned to apply curiosity to the root of what they or other people actually want and getting to that root. Once you see that every single thing that every person does is their best attempt at accessing love, safety, and belonging, it's like, and they just might be fucking up. They might be producing shame or hatred or chaos. But truly, if you were to get in a room with them and be sincerely curious and loving, I would bet my life that you would find that what that person wanted was something associated with love, safety, and belonging. When you see the world like that, it becomes almost impossible to judge yourself for what you want. This lifetime is just a practice of the amplification of the internal experiences we want to have and helping others get those internal experiences too. That's one thing. The second thing is that some people are operating with a belief or like this meaning-making system that they're afraid that they might be fundamentally broken. So other people can get what they want. Other people can adapt. Other people can go from not having love to having love. But something about me is fundamentally broken. And I'm terrified of actually putting myself out there and failing, not getting the relationship, not getting the whatever the thing is. And if I fail, then I learn that I am somehow fundamentally broken. And the idea of learning that I'm broken is terrifying. So I would rather continue with this version of life that is mildly disappointing. Or a client said it beautifully recently. It's like, it wasn't that there's the presence of disappointment, it's that there's the absence of joy. So I'm going to continue to live this life where there's the absence of joy because I'm terrified of the consequences of learning that I'm broken. What's really interesting about that is that what that person is doing is projecting an image into the future of what it means to be broken. And they're making a prediction that if they find out they're broken, then they no longer have access to love, safety, and belonging. But if you practice this thing, that love, safety, and belonging and its associated states are infinitely available in every moment, even if you were to learn that you are broken, and somehow you can't like adapt and get what you want, you would still have infinite access to love, safety, and belonging. What the person is doing is seeing that they would be alone when the truth is you are alone in one version of reality, but in another version of reality, when you choose to relate to yourself in the way that we've been talking about, there's always love, safety, and belonging available. And now, of course, having it with another person is a better version of it. It amplifies it. It makes it more. It exponentially increases the amount of energy for both of you or all three of you, whatever, and for the planet. So yes, it's better. But what I think this is about is learning about how to best set ourselves up to get that better version. And the way that seems the most likely to set ourselves up to get that better version is to practice a relationship with ourselves internally where we are giving ourselves abundant love, safety, and belonging in every single moment.
Yeah, 100%. And often we attract the relationships or we have the relationships around us that are reinforcing that negative state about us unless we can have it on our own. I mean, so many people who are manifesting partnerships, the number one tip for manifesting a partnership is cultivate a fantastic relationship with yourself. Because if you don't have the foundation of what it's like to love yourself, how the hell is someone else going to come in and know how to love you? You can't expect someone else to give something that you're not giving to yourself. So work on the aspect of giving to yourself first.
And what do you think it means for someone to love themselves? If someone is loving themselves, how would they know?
For me, it has felt like deep compassion. It is deep compassion for all of the different parts. It's being able to hold the both and that's going on internally. And from that place of compassion, make choices that are loving and nurturing and caretaking. I think of like we call it the magnetic self, ISF calls it the self, that inner wise grandma that you talk about too, like that entity that's within us. When we let that version of us lead, it's almost like a parent. Well, what do you need right now? Do you need to go take a nap? You've really overextended yourself. You have no sleep. Are you eating a nourishing meal? It's like figuring out how to care for all of the parts of you. And then when those parts come up that you really just don't like, you want to pretend you don't have them, you want to suppress them, put them away, inviting them back in and saying, hey, it's okay. It feels really uncomfortable. These emotions are huge and massive. And maybe we just like clench our fists and feel all the rage, and then we can release it. That is the practice of self-love.
I really agree with that. I think that's a beautiful description of what it's actually like to be in a state that we can describe as loving yourself. Sometimes I describe it as like you are this pumping heart, and the nutrients in your bloodstream, your blood is beautiful, like so much oxygen, so much nutrients, and you're this pumping heart that is distributing nutrients to all the cells of your body equally. And you're just sitting there in any given moment equally distributing these like beautiful life-giving nutrients, that's what it's like to relate to your parts in a way that we can describe as loving. Like you are eager to give the parts of you love. And as you were describing that, I was thinking about the person who's in the position who might say like, oh, I struggle to love myself, or I don't know how to do that. And I actually think like one of the steps, I don't know exactly where it is, but something in between that space and the space you described is the choice to prioritize one's internal experience, to say like, I'm going to create a life where my internal experience matters at least as much as other people's internal experiences matter. And I'm going to choose to feel good, not because good is objectively correct or morally correct, but it's simply my preference, the choice I want to make. I think those choices have to be made in order to get from I don't know how to love myself to the place that you describe.
And there's an element of deservingness, I think, that comes in where it's like, yeah, but I have to take care of my kids first, or I have to do this first, and everything gets prioritized first. And when you can let that inner magnetic self come in, that is full deserving. It knows that you need caring and protection, despite also needing to care and protect for other people. I think sometimes we can not recognize when our other parts sort of take over and they're running the show. Intellectually, you know you have to take care of yourself and you're like, I know, I'll do that for sure, but you're not doing it. And when your actions are not meeting the needs of your internal state, that's when that you can immediately recognize a part has taken over.
Yes. Parts can be black holes. And one of the things that Dick Schwartz does, I think he does a great job of doing, is normalizing multiple personality disorder and saying that we're all kind of on a spectrum of multiple personality disorder. What separates someone who can be diagnosed with multiple personality disorder from me is that when a person with multiple personality disorder is in one of their parts, they've lost awareness that other parts exist or that they're in a part. And in the worst cases of becoming a part, like it sucks you in like a black hole and you don't remember that there's another version of life that TBM describes as like the magnetic self, which I really love that. You lose awareness of the existence of that. And that's when we can really help people, is identifying when they've been sucked into the black hole. Like, how do you know when you're in the black hole? And then how do you know how to, it's not necessarily get out. It's more about how to witness the black hole experience from the perspective of wise grandma or from the magnetic self.
Yes. I think that first step is exactly that. It's the witness. Let me just witness what is happening right now. And that's how you can kind of separate and be like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here, and start to have compassion and hold space.
Yes. Beautifully said.
Oh my gosh, we could talk forever. This was so fun. I feel like we will definitely have to have a part 2 at some point too.
I would love that. I love the questions you asked so much. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming on. And where can people find you, connect with you, get more? I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people like, what? I need to know more about this.
Thank you for that. Yeah. So I'm active on Instagram. I'm at Flynn Skidmore, FLYNNSKIDMORE. I really like the newsletter that I put out every week. I really like it and I pour my heart into it. So free newsletter that comes every Tuesday. I also just launched my podcast, the Flynn Skidmore podcast, a couple months ago. And we're having an amazing time running that. And like you said, like it's really an experience to be running a podcast with the conversations. The people that are on there are like really lighting me up. They're super informative. So I think that people might enjoy that podcast as well. Thank you for that invitation to share that.
Of course. Well, thank you very much. Very expansive convo, a lot to simmer on. I'm sure this is like one of those episodes that people are like, okay, wait, I have to listen multiple different times to take different pieces of it. So I'm excited for that.
Thanks so much.
I hope you all enjoyed that episode as much as we did. And if you're starting to get a feel for this to be magnetic manifestation process, but aren't completely sold yet, let me point you to some of our free offerings. You can check out the expanded podcast episode called How to Manifest Anything You Desire, where Lacey, the founder, and I break down exactly what this process is all about. You can check out the Motivation, which is our testimonial library with thousands of testimonials of people who have manifested wild things using this process. Or you could check out our free quiz to find out what manifestation phase you were in, the rut, the rock bottom, the next level, or the magic dark, and how you can navigate. Enjoy! We'll see you next week.